This happened over 20 years ago. I was driving back home with my girlfriend at the time. It was Christmas Eve, and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family, but she got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of adult beverages. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave. Therefore, I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 p.m. or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along Highway 211. Now, this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit. But nothing to fear. I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The both of us were just driving and talking away, just two young lovers making the most of our moment together. There is a portion of the highway that descends down an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road are thick forests. There are no lights. The only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drive down the hill, cross the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway starts to flatten out that it happens. Something sprints across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slam on the brakes. I turn to my girlfriend and ask her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of the car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dart out in front of cars. Not like that, anyway. So, for some reason, I decide to check it out. I turn the car around and switch on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had vanished in. I step out of the car and walk towards the woods. I don't see anything, but now it feels like perhaps I've made a grave error. My heart is pounding, and the hairs on the back of my neck are standing at full attention. But I still don't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly, the car's horn blasts. It's not a beep, beep, beep that you'd get if, say, your driver or passenger wanted you to hurry up and get in the car. No, this was a long and blaring beep. I walk back to the car and ask my girlfriend why she leaned on the horn like that. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely, this was the thing that ran in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud. And in one of his hands, he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us, and then he smiled and waved to us just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. While I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest beyond my car headlights. my girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye, and that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home, but they never found anybody. Or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. The man was obviously looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently, so I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet, but I can tell you that I'm definitely extra vigilant now, especially near Deep Creek. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretch of divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, a white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed, at least 90. It's worth noting for later that I also drive a white Ford sedan. I was used to drunk idiot drivers in the middle of the night, so I pulled to the side of the road and let him pass me. I had a moment of clarity and thought to call the police, thinking this person could hurt themselves or somebody else. The dispatcher answered, and after telling them which road and exit and mile marker I was at, they told me they would send a car. The state police station was only a few exits away, so I figured they would send somebody and I would just drive home. As I headed back onto the highway, I noticed some lights a few miles behind me. I live in a more rural part of southeastern Pennsylvania, and traffic at 3 a.m. tends to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I thought I was going to be pulled over by the police. I drove a white Ford sedan and had just called about a different white Ford sedan, so I grabbed my registration from my glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. They must have shut off their car because the lights went out, and I saw what looked to be the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car, since they had a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for my gun in the glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a little curt with me and assured me that they had sent somebody out. "We have sent a trooper out to find the car, sir," they said. I replied, "I only ask because somebody is following me and acting weird. It could be a cop, and I think I freaked them out by getting my registration." "Are you pulled over?" the dispatcher asked. "No, they didn't turn on their lights." "All right, let me try to get the trooper we sent out." As the trooper was talking, the car again sped towards me and stopped inches from my bumper. Again, their high beams were on, and again they slammed their brakes. I told the dispatcher, "I'm pretty sure this is not the police behind me." The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. What's happening? Did you honk?" "That's the car behind me," I said. "I don't think it's a cop." The dispatcher replied, "I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you." This is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, "I don't care if I get pulled over. I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over." I started to accelerate, and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55, and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit, then bail on it, but they followed. At the next exit, I took the off-ramp and continued onto the on-ramp, and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about trying to go to a Wawa, a convenience store that's pretty much the only populated place in southeastern Pennsylvania at 3 a.m., but the dispatcher and I thought that would be unsafe. The dispatcher was calm and talking to another person trying to send the police over to me. The other person asked if I could drive to the state police station. Realizing that I was only one exit away, I told her I was coming there, and she said that she would have troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off to the exit, the car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station, and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal, and the car slammed on its brakes again, turned off their lights, and turned into a parking lot. The story ends kind of anticlimactically as I pulled into the police station and met the troopers. 2 of them went to find the car, and I stayed with a 3rd trooper. I thanked the dispatcher and her supervisor, and the state trooper escorted me home after taking a statement from me. I was never called to follow up or testify, so I can only assume the person didn't get caught. This happened close to 15 years ago when I was about 7. I didn't realize how creepy the situation was until many years later. My dad and I went on a weekend motorcycle trip to Maryland from New York to watch motocross racing at a track called Budds Creek. It was an awesome trip. I loved spending time with my dad and watching the racers speed around this insane dirt track. I met 2 of the all-time greats for that time. If you're familiar with early 2000s motocross, you'll know who I'm talking about. They always came in first and second in every race. We did the drive back in one go. It was late at night, and we were somewhere in southern Pennsylvania when I started getting really cold on the back of the bike. My dad pulled over on the side of I-95 so I could warm up. Within a minute of stopping, a van pulled up behind us, and this older couple got out. The man started talking to my dad, saying they had followed us for some time, and that I looked so uncomfortable, and how they were headed north, and that I should ride with them in the warm van instead. I remember the man kneeling down and asking me if I wanted the snacks they had in the van, and if I wanted to go to Hershey Park. My dad is a pretty tough guy, and I remember him talking to them in a hushed voice, probably so I wouldn't hear him threatening them. He told me years later that he told them he had a gun strapped to his hip, and they better drive away right now before he used it. They continued to try and convince him, but they left after a few minutes. I'm probably out of their preferred age range now, but hey, Probable child abductors? Let's not meet. This was quite a few years ago, and I've still never got an explanation. My dad and I were driving through East Texas from his house to my mom's, and we were right outside this city, and it was a mixture of farmland and forest, when he noticed something in the air to the left. I looked and saw what can only be described as a white cloth-like figure in the shape of a woman flying through the air very high above the car. It somewhat resembled the ghosts at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark in just how cloth-like it looked, but it left no trail and seemed to fly independently. It flew from over the left side of the car to the right, and then just vanished while still in the sky. I don't know if it helps, but on this same route a few years ago, we somehow finished the hour-and-a-half drive in just around 20 to 30 minutes. I just have no explanation. I'm a 16-year-old male, and I used to be a bit skeptical about all things paranormal until one weekend at an abandoned house. I was with my two best friends at the time, Delaney and Julia. We were home alone and bored at Delaney's house with nothing to do. I can't remember whose idea it was, but one of us had the idea to drive around some of the old dirt roads and check out abandoned buildings. There are a lot of abandoned places around where we live. It's pretty far out in the country, surrounded by woods and farmland. First, we went to two old tobacco houses, took a few pictures, and just sort of goofed off. We got back on the road and eventually came across an old unkempt driveway. Keep in mind, hardly anyone lives on this road. We decided to drive down the driveway despite Julia saying we shouldn't. She said it didn't feel right to her, not because it would be trespassing, but because she had extremely bad vibes about that place. However, Delaney and I insisted. We started driving and realized that it went pretty far back into the woods. This is where weird things started to happen. We parked the truck in a little clearing and noticed an abandoned house in the distance. But before we could get out of the truck, the front sensor started beeping like crazy, followed by the one in the rear. It was as if someone had walked around the truck. The weird thing is that we were parked in a clearing, so there was seemingly nothing to trigger the sensors. Delaney and Julia were kind of freaked out, but I decided to just ignore it. We all got out of the truck and started walking towards the house. I was walking in the front, showing off and acting fearless. And I really wasn't that scared until I saw her. A woman with dingy-looking hair and a colonial-style dress peering around the corner of the house. She looked at me and just put her finger up to her lips as if to shush me. The feeling I had is almost indescribable. Imagine feeling as if all sense of safety and protection is gone and you don't feel happy at all. My heart felt like it stopped. I started crying and I was so scared. I knew she wasn't human. I don't know how, but I just knew. I turned around to my friends and screamed, "Run!" and started sprinting back to the truck. Somehow, my phone flew out of my pocket about halfway back to the truck. I decided to ditch it. We eventually made it back. I tried to open it, but it was locked. Delaney reached for her keys, but they were gone, and so was Julia's phone. It's as if whatever that thing was trying to keep us there. Delaney ran back and picked up mine and Julia's phone, as well as her keys. We got in the truck and floored it out of there. You might think it's just coincidental that we dropped all of our things, but honestly, They were all shoved down so deep in our pockets that it didn't make sense for them to just fall out on their own like that. Later that night at the house, we were all discussing what we had just experienced, but my friends didn't even see the woman. I was afraid they didn't believe me, but Julia reassured me that the horrified look on my face was proof enough for her to run as well. We later found out that there had been several sightings of ghosts on that exact same road, made by workers at Fort Pickett, a nearby military facility.